Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the ReBinge Deep Space Nine Season 6 wrap-up. My name is James.
And my name is Kim, and we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are wrapping up Season 6.
Yes.
We'll be doing what we always do at the end of a season, talking about our top 10 favorite or best episodes and our bottom 5. Then we'll go through some categories that we like to talk about, and then we will read some of our listener feedback.
That is the plan.
You know, as we record this, Picard is still in full swing, and many people emailed us, and a few reached out to me on other platforms to say there's so many Deep Space Nine spoilers.
Yes.
We also figured that out on our own because I did get one spoiler, and then we became very cautious after that. And so I had to stop watching because even though TNG is my favorite Star Trek, probably always will be, I'm so invested in the show now, I don't want it ruined.
It's understandable.
I am just against spoilers. This is hard, though, because now if I have to wait until we get to the end of Deep Space Nine, we have an entire season to go. If I have to wait another 26 weeks before I get to watch Picard, that is a bummer. And not just a bummer, almost impossible to avoid spoilers of that. So I'm worried about spoilers at this point. It's like I just want to hide with a pillow over my head until everything is safe.
Maybe you should follow my advice, which is to just binge the entire rest of Deep Space Nine.
I did think about that I could binge through it, but I don't like to do it because I feel like it sort of messes with the podcast when I jump ahead. I like to be unbiased when we talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, so we're just doing our immediate reactions. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to know too much about what's coming because it will change you talking about it.
Yeah. So basically what I'm saying is we're doing the best we can. Okay, so let's get started wrapping up Season 6. And I think you said that I went first last time, so you can go first this time. And I never remember, do we do the best or the worst first?
As it's my choice, I'm going to start with the worst because it will only get better from there.
Okay, so tell me your bottom 5 and save the worst of the 5 for last.
Number 5 is the least worst. Number 1 is the worst worst.
Correct.
So coming in at number 5, Who Mourns for Morn? What an incredible missed opportunity to make Morn a rich, interesting character with a kind of Robin Hood or maybe a lovable rogue background. But instead, you made Morn kind of a petty thief who stiffed the other petty thieves in a robbery.
Yeah, not exciting, that episode.
Number 4, His Way. I don't care about Vegas in the 60s.
Yeah.
Number 3, Time's Orphan. How to make an emotionally challenging episode, utterly devoid of any actual emotion. Number 2, Statistical Probabilities. I think we covered everything wrong with this episode in the podcast. Just total swing and a miss. In fact, I don't even know if it was playing baseball.
Wiffle ball.
And of course, number 1, I bet you can guess, Profit and Lace.
Yeah.
An exercise in how to make a really just bad episode on so many levels.
And how you can insult so many people in 46 minutes.
Yeah, impressive. Okay, so that's my Hall of Shame.
Well, my bottom 5 are very similar to yours.
Yeah.
There is really only one difference.
Oh.
I did debate whether or not to put Who Mourns for Morn or Resurrection.
Oh, you really didn't like that, yeah.
Number 5. Resurrection, I just thought was a big nothing burger, and it just wasn't that good. But I decided on Who Mourns for Morn for the same reasons that you already mentioned.
Yeah.
And then my number 4 is one that you didn't mention, which is Honor Among Thieves.
Oh.
I really thought that episode was awful. Yeah. I didn't like what they did to Miles, and in the end, he tried to save the criminal, and it just wasn't earned, and they were trying to be Donnie Brasco, and it was just, it was dumb. Yeah. And also, there was no Star Trek in it. It was just a bust.
I think that was number 6 on my list, if I had a 6.
My next one is Statistical Probabilities. You already mentioned the problems with that. I think there were a lot of good ideas in that episode. I
Yeah.
just didn't think it was executed well. It felt, from our perspective, it felt like a lot of stereotyping, a lot of really negative stereotyping.
It felt like a mocking episode.
Yeah, we didn't get into it. Then my number 2 is Time's Orphan.
Oh.
Because Time's Orphan, it should have been so emotional, and somehow Keiko was just ready to give up her child and she wasn't even crying. I mean, it's ridiculous. Such a bad episode. And my worst one is the same as yours, Profit and Lace.
Yeah, not a surprise.
It's funny now because now when you and I review these episodes, we dislike a lot of the same things now. It's like we've somehow sort of come together and aligned.
Yes, that is strange.
On what's making a good episode here and what's making a bad episode here. It's not a surprise that this list is close. Obviously, I had His Way is not number 6 for me. It's number 7, but it's towards the bottom as well.
Yeah.
I imagine that number 8 on our list is quite different. But yeah, it's not surprising that the bottom 5 match so closely.
We've kind of come into a loose alignment here.
I also think it's because, again, we joke about this a lot. All the people telling me this is the best episode, right? Or season, sorry. Because this is what you're waiting for. This is the greatest season ever. And I've been hearing that for many seasons, and I'm sure I'll hear about it for season 7 as well. But it's true, there are so many good episodes here.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, we've just filtered those really good episodes to the top. And then what's left are sort of these crumbs, these afterthought type episodes.
Agreed.
I'm sure people would disagree with a few of the crumbs here.
As we've had emails about it, some people do disagree.
They do. But overall, what floats to the top, we're going to agree on now, and what sinks to the bottom, we're going to agree on.
Yeah. I think you reach a point of there's a very solid base of what we expect of a good episode.
Yep.
Shall I move on to the cream of the crop?
Yep.
Okay, so I will do 10 to 6.
Okay.
Number 10, Valiant. This was such an interesting take on, and I described it as the cult of Starfleet, and also the cult of personality, how this idea of the great man can even permeate Starfleet. I thought that was so good, and I felt so bad for that character, Dorian, where she says, we let this guy down. Such an interesting episode.
Yeah.
Number 9, Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. A tie-in with a very interesting, horrific historical background. And also an attempt by the prophets to show Kira that some of the people she saw as collaborators were actually victims in their own right.
Yeah.
Very interesting episode. Another one of your examples came of, don't look into the history, it's actually even worse than you imagine.
Yeah. It's a very dark episode.
Yeah.
It's a tough watch, really. And I agree that it showed an important advancement or education maybe for Kira. It was important for her history, for her backstory, I guess, as a character. And sort of for where she needs to go from her current point, or the point she was at the beginning of the episode. So I do think there were a bunch of important things there. I guess what I didn't like about that episode is I don't want to watch that stuff in Star Trek.
Yeah.
I just don't. It was horrible. From my perspective, I found it so uncomfortable the way those women were being treated and the way they had to act and the situation that they were forced into. And I just found that really difficult to sit through.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I think overall it was a strong episode, I there's no way I could put that in my top 10 just because I don't ever want to watch it again.
Yeah. I think it was a good Star Trek episode because it dealt with a real issue that maybe has been forgotten about or glossed over.
Yeah. I get it. I just don't want to watch it again.
Understood. Number 8, One Little Ship. This was a fun episode. It was good Star Trek.
Yep.
It had a little bit of sort of science-y. It was goofy. It was enjoyable watch. Number 7, Change of Heart.
Oh.
An episode I initially did not like.
Yeah.
And then during the rewatch, during the rebinge, it was an episode that I really got. Having watched and rewatched and discussed with you the wedding episode, seeing Change of Heart really altered my view of it. Made it a much more enjoyable episode.
Oh, surprising. Okay.
And number 6, The Magnificent Ferengi. It was a funny episode, it worked, and it was a nice nod to the source material of The Magnificent Seven. So that's my 6 to 10. Over to you, Kim.
Well, we have only a couple of things in common in that list.
Oh.
We have 2 that are the same, but I think the rest are different. What I was trying to do here was not just focus on the monumental episodes in the season, because there are a couple of them, but I also wanted to just include things that I enjoyed.
Oh, yeah.
Episodes that I thought were fun and that I would watch again, even if they're not the greatest episode in Star Trek history. So I heard that a little bit even in what you were talking about.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see that both in my 10 through 6 and in my 5 through 1. So for me, number 10 was Inquisition.
Oh, really?
It's almost easy to change in and out a few episodes here and there.
Yeah.
This could have been a few other ones that I quite liked. I agree with you about what you said about Valiant, for example. That could have been on the list. But I chose Inquisition because it was different. It was the start of Section 31.
Yeah.
And I like those episodes where they start you in one place and then they take you to a completely unexpected place.
That's true. That did happen with
That's kind of what this was about. And so, yeah, I enjoyed it. I would watch it again.
I think I mentioned in the podcast, I had that episode figured out 3/4 of the way through and then was wonderfully proved completely wrong.
Yeah, well, those are the best.
Yeah, exactly.
Then my number 9 is the second episode of the season, Rocks and Shoals.
Oh, yeah.
I liked the way the season started, but I also, at the beginning of the season, was just like, oh, how long am I going to have to put up with this war? Turns out for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like change. We were on the station. I'd found my comfort zone there, and now we're not there anymore. And what is there is that horrible Gul Dukat, and every time we go there, I have to deal with him.
Right.
So I did find the beginning of the season a little bit unsettling, but I liked Rocks and Shoals. It was sort of a victory for the good guys, but it also showed some cracks in the Dominion Foundation.
Oh, agreed.
We saw that the Vorta, they're just kind of cowards and they're out for themselves, and I like that part of the story.
Agreed.
So number 8 for me is episode 1 of the season, A Time to Stand.
Oh.
It's a great episode. It's a great kickoff for the rest of the season. Then number 7 for me is One Little Ship.
Ah.
So here's where we cross over.
Yep.
It was just a fun episode. I laughed so hard. There were just a couple of things that were so funny.
Well, there was the piece where the tiny ship floats in front of Worf and Sisko says,
gosh.
I believe your wife is here.
Then Dax blows Worf a kiss. It was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was just, again, just enjoyable. Just a fun episode. And then what will probably shock a lot of people is that my number 6 is The Magnificent Ferengi.
Wow. We are on the same page.
Nobody hates the Ferengi more than me. There's not a person who exists. But this episode was what the Ferengi episodes should have been.
Yeah.
What we had been saying since the beginning. You don't have to drag everybody else down in order to make it funny and entertaining and to advance the story.
Yeah.
And this was the best version of that. It was funny, but it also had some drama in it. And it was just entertaining. And it even introduced us to different types of Ferengi. We talk about this a lot, where everybody on the planet is not the same. It's impossible. They can't all have the exact same ideas and religion and philosophies. It's impossible. So this introduced us to different kinds of Ferengi, and I really enjoyed it, and I would absolutely watch it again.
Agreed.
That's not even mentioning Iggy Pop, who was very entertaining and scary.
And I think the other thing there is part of the humor in this was poking fun at the Ferengi's own failings, where you can make humor without it being insulting.
Yeah.
So we only crossed on 2.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So
top 5.
And in at number 5, Rocks and Shoals.
Okay.
Why this makes my top 5 is because it was a really interesting seeing absolute true believer Jem'Hadar and the absolute self-serving cynicism that some of the Vorta seem to have, and contrasting that with Starfleet, who to a large extent were also true believers. Even Sisko at the end trying to find a solution, trying to get them to not fight. Number 4, Far Beyond the Stars. Such an innovative idea of progressing the story, telling the story of Sisko, while also telling a story of social injustice. And doing it in a very Star Trek kind of way.
Right.
A very rewatchable episode and very skillfully presented. And just a great performance by Avery Brooks.
I would like to make a comment, but you know it's going to come up in my top 5, and I'll have something to say about it then.
Okay.
But I agree with what you said.
Number 3, The sound of her voice.
Oh.
So emotional.
Yeah, that one really got you. And I understand. The super emotional episodes, I agree, they should be in your top 5. If it made you cry, it ought to be there.
Yeah, an episode that still gets me 30 years later, that's got to be in the top 5.
It's a good episode.
Number 2, In the Pale Moonlight.
Oh, number 2.
Yes. I mean...
Is it T-But listening?
Cisco and Garrick just showing off their acting skills is a fantastic watch. Talk about rewatchability. This is an episode you can come back to multiple times and still enjoy it.
Yep.
Number 1. I bet you can guess what it is.
The Reckoning?
The Reckoning.
I only go by that was our longest episode.
Kai Wynn, the Prophets, Faith, everything you could want in an episode that involves the Prophets.
Wow. Well, that is interesting. That means that my number 1 is not even in your top 10.
Wow. Oh, I know what your number 1 is. It's probably my number 11.
Okay. Well, yeah, the sound of her voice, I think, is my number 11. So we had that in common. Well, I guess I'll do my top 5 then, and then we can talk about it.
Okay, let's hear it. I'm very interested.
So I had at my number 5, Far Beyond the Stars.
Ah.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. The performances in that episode they're amazing. And even the costumes and the hair are just incredible. Everybody looks great. What I liked about it was an episode where they stepped out of the usual Star Trek, but unlike Inner Light, this episode kept a link to the overarching story, and it linked to the prophets. And also it kept all of the normal characters there, or at least the actors, but playing different parts. So you still felt connected to it, which is the thing I struggle with the Picard episode. Oh. Now, we talked quite a bit when we watched that episode about whether or not it was actually uplifting or a downer. I found it to be a downer, and I have to say I'm not sure I would watch it again. So this one is the one that sort of betrays I want just the episodes I liked here, but I find it tough to watch things like that because is the world better than it was then? I suppose it is in many ways, but in many ways it's not. It just makes it hard to watch, but I don't want to hold it against an episode that had good performances and a good story overall.
Yes.
My number 4, also one not in your top 10, but I can understand why. It's You Are Cordially Invited.
Oh, that's such a tough one not to put on my list. It was a great episode.
There's a lot of humor in it, but there are things in it I don't like and would not want to watch again. There are, the way that the women fight, I think is stereotypical. It's not uplifting in any way. I don't know, there's just a few things in there that aren't great.
Yeah.
But what I loved about it was, obviously, I loved that Klingon ceremony. And I also really loved the so-called bachelor party that just turned out to be another Klingon torture event. And I thought it was very funny the way that they handled that. So yeah, I did enjoy that. So this is an example of, do I think this is one of the greatest episodes in the history of Star Trek? I do not. Did I find it very entertaining? Yes. Primarily because I thought the Klingon wedding ceremony was great. And I really liked it.
And for me, I think that episode led on to actually enjoying Change of Heart.
100%. If you don't pay attention to that and that story doesn't resonate with you, then the thing that happens in Change of Heart has no emotional impact.
Yeah.
I completely get that. Now, my top 3 could be in any order. These are 3 of my favorite episodes. I think they're also 3 of the best episodes of this show.
Yeah.
So for number 3, I put The Reckoning. For all of the reasons that you said, it's really hard for me to do anything other than love an episode that has Louise Fletcher in it because she's so good. Not just because of her, though, because of that character. And that character is fascinating. So I get it. I don't think The Reckoning was as good as Rapture from last season, but they're connected.
Yes.
And each one makes the other one better because of that connection. So for my number 2, it's the same as yours, In the Pale Moonlight. An excellent episode, very entertaining, not exactly what you expect. I struggled a bit with it because I feel like it was built up too much for me. And also I knew some of the little things in it, and watching them, I found it distracting, as those things fit in.
Right.
But going back and watching it the second time, I'm like, okay, I get it, right? This is a good episode. The performances are great. It's just a little bit different in terms of the outcome, not maybe what you would have expected from a Picard.
Right.
Or from one of the other captains that we know. Just a great episode, a great use of Garrick, and great performances again by Avery Brooks. And then my number one episode, again, not in your top 10, was Sacrifice of Angels.
Oh, really?
Did you think it was something else?
I wasn't sure. You had me.
Okay.
I had no idea.
So Sacrifice of Angels to me was like the third act of a movie, of one of the Star Trek movies. I found it to be emotional and had a lot of effects because there were space battles and there was this big connection to the prophets because Sisko had to call on them to help him.
Right.
So it sort of brought all of the things that I really like about this show together. The only thing really that it was missing was Kai Wynn, but she didn't fit in the story. But it just brought the things that I have learned to really like about the show all into one episode. And I thought it was great. That, to me, is one of the best episodes of all of Star Trek.
I still find it interesting that makes it onto your list of the best Star Trek episodes.
Absolutely.
Everything else, all the other episodes in the season that weren't on the bad list, are tied for 11th place.
I do understand that. And because really, the first 6 episodes all are one big arc of them being off the station and then getting the station back, because I think it's in 6 where they get it back. I mean, I know it's in 6 where they get it back. So if you could just take that as one thing, that would be the number one for me.
Well, that was an interesting contrast in the top 10.
Yeah. Overall, similar, but a few things here and there that were different. So it was good.
Well, after that, should we move on to guest stars?
Yes, we should. And just a reminder, if you didn't listen to our last wrap-up, we would give Louise Fletcher every acting award. And so we decided to name every acting award the Louise Fletcher Award.
The ReBingeIT Louise Fletcher Award for guest stars.
Right. So let's start, first of all, maybe with the non-recurring ones. So if they appeared in 2 or fewer episodes, who's your pick?
There's only one person I can pick. Iggy Pop. I mean, it may be because I like his music, but it's also because as a voter, he just exuded something and that voice just worked.
Yeah.
He is terrifying as a voter.
Yeah, memorable for sure.
Absolutely.
I narrowed it down to 4 performances.
Oh.
And one was Stephen McHattie in The Pale Moonlight as Vreenak. And one was William Sadler in Inquisition as Sloane.
Yes.
And one was Hamilton Camp. He was Lek in The Magnificent Ferengi. And I quite liked him. Just a funny performance.
Yes. Answering the comms with, who do you want killed?
Yeah. And then Iggy Pop. So I agree. I think Iggy Pop was the best of those, but I think Sloane was second. Very close.
If you were looking at it in pure acting terms, it is Sadler. But like I said, I think I might be biased towards Iggy.
Iggy Pop was just, you can't forget him.
Yes.
All right, then let's talk about the recurring characters or the recurring guest stars. And in this season, there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark Alaimo as Dukat appears in a ton of episodes. We actually don't see a lot of Garrick in this season.
No.
He's there a few times, but obviously he's really good in The Pale Moonlight.
Yeah.
We only get Louise Fletcher one time, but I still say she was the best. So the award still goes to her.
Oh, agreed.
And we also didn't see Rosalind Chavez Keiko very much. But we see a ton of J.G. Hertzler as Martog, even in Far Beyond the Stars without his makeup. And we see a ton of Casey Biggs as Damar. And we see a ton of Weyoun and Jeffrey Combs.
Oh.
So we see a lot of those repeating characters quite a bit. I would also throw into this category Melanie Smith as Zial. We get to see her until she's killed. The female changeling, Salome Jens, we only see a few times, but she's also, I think, to be considered in this category.
Yes.
So of this list of these repeating characters, who do you think was the best? Who had the best performance?
It's tough because I think Mark Alaimo did a fantastic job of just really showing the level of depravity that is Ducat.
Hmm.
He just made it very real. But at the same time, the performance of J.G. Hertzler as Martok, he gets it to such a degree. It's wonderful to watch him on screen. And even when he plays the artist in Far Beyond the Stars, it's great to just, watch his portrayal of that character.
Right.
I'm going to have to go with Hertzler just because I like the character of Martok. But Alaimo did an amazing job this season. The other people you mentioned there, they all add a lot to the season. It's trying to pick who is the best of a great bunch, and it's hard.
Yeah.
Salome Jens brought the female changeling to life as well. You saw sort of just how nasty that character was. And this is being able to do it with someone who has basically a mask on their face the whole time.
Yeah.
Great performances by so many of these guest stars.
Yeah, I think that whole group really added to the richness of the season.
Yeah.
And I guess I might give the Louise Fletcher Award to Jeffrey Combs because he's so great at Weyoun, and we really grow to understand Weyoun, I think, through his performance.
Yeah.
What I also like about him is he bounces back and forth, and he plays a bunch of different characters as well, and he just seems to do that really easily. Like, he plays Brunt a couple of times. He's a character I can't stand. But I think if I'm going to give an acting award, and I'm not going to give it to Louise Fletcher, but I'm going to give it in her name, I think I'd give it to him.
Yeah.
I do believe that this is Mark Alaimo's season, where this was his opportunity to probably get this award, maybe his only opportunity to get this award.
Yeah.
But even though I thought he was good in Waltz, for example, and he was good in Sacrifice of Angels as well, but there was almost something about a lack of nuance, maybe, for me in the performance. And I just hate him. I don't want to watch him. I just think it's awful. Whereas Louise Fletcher, who's playing a bad guy as well, and a character that I can't stand, I want to see her. I want to see more of her, and it's because of that performance. And I just didn't get that from Mark Alaimo. I just don't think I'm going to give it to him. I think I'll give it to Jeffrey Combs.
Combs is an excellent choice, but I just love Klingons.
Oh, I understand. I thought J.G. Hertzler was great. I think I gave it to him last time, didn't I? I can't remember. No, I love him. I love that character. My favorite Klingon, bar none. Okay, let's go on to best and worst plot line. What would you say is the best plot line of the season?
Okay, I actually have two.
Okay, that's fair because I have two on the worst plot line list.
The first one is The Reckoning, because I have that as best sci-fi, and I have The Pale Moonlight as the best thriller.
I agree. In The Pale Moonlight is probably the best plot line because it's surprising. It's still a Star Trek story.
Yeah.
I agree. That was my best as well. Then what do you say is the worst?
Oh, it's tied here between Nell and Donnie Brasco. Also known as Time's Orphan and Honor Amongst Thieves.
Yeah, I agree. I had Time's Orphan. I have two that I think are the worst, and Time's Orphan is one of them. I mean, your daughter's going away forever and you don't care. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
It just didn't fit with anything. It made no sense. But for me, the other one I included as the worst was Statistical Probabilities.
Really?
Because I believe that it was so wasted. It's not a bad idea. It should have been good, but I just think they screwed it up.
Interesting. Yeah.
By how they portrayed those characters.
So, should we move on to the most Star Trek thing and least Star Trek thing?
Yes.
What is your most Star Trek thing to have happened?
Well, I would argue In the Pale Moonlight is the most Star Trek thing to have happened. Because it's a moral dilemma that tests our heroes, or at least our main hero.
Yeah.
What made it fascinating was the way our hero in this show reacted compared to the discussion that we had about how some of the other heroes may have acted in that same situation. That it's a common thing that they have to make difficult decisions. The way this decision was made and sort of what, the result of what happened is probably quite different from every other show that we've had in Star Trek, at least certainly up till that time. But I still feel like that moral dilemma, that's the most Star Trek thing ever.
Interesting. That is actually my least Star Trek thing to have happened.
Ooh, controversy.
Because Sisko did not make the truly moral decision there. As he says at the end, he's an accomplice to murder, to falsifying records, to bring the Romulans into the war on false pretenses. Yes, I see it's a moral dilemma episode.
Yeah.
But unlike Star Trek, Sisko does not make a purely moral decision. He makes a practical decision for the good of the Alpha Quadrant, which arguably is more important than his own personal morality.
But let me tell you why that's a Star Trek decision.
Yeah.
And it's very simple.
Go.
The needs of the many.
But Kirk did break all the rules because sometimes the needs of the few or the one.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Star Trek 2.
Yeah.
The Wrath of Khan, the piece of Star Trek that got me into Star Trek, that made me a devoted Star Trekker for life, was Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one or two who Garrett got rid of. So I totally get what you're saying, but I didn't know when I sat down to fill out our spreadsheet that's what I was going to put in there, because I thought the same thing. It's like, oh, gee, maybe that's the least Star Trek thing. And I was like, but no, it isn't. It's so Star Trek.
Interesting.
We were just surprised by some of the details of what happened.
Yeah.
But the moral dilemma and doing the right thing for the most people, that's the Star Trek way.
Fascinating. I think we see that one as a different versions of Star Trek.
That's fine. I think that's fine.
Okay.
Well, then what did you have as your most Star Trek thing?
Well, Jake and Kira being taken over by the prophets and the Par race. Come on, what's not more Star Trek than that?
I think that was my example of last season as the most Star Trek thing was the assignment.
Yeah.
Well, I had in my least Star Trek thing then, I had two. I had one little ship.
Really?
I mean, it was just, come on, that was just silly.
Yeah.
I still loved it. Obviously, it's in my top 10. I really enjoyed it, but I thought it was played as goofy. And I don't think goofy enhances Trek.
Yeah.
So that was one.
I find that very interesting. I felt that was very Star Trek, pure science fiction-y.
No, it was Honey, I Shrunk the Bridge crew.
I was thinking more Incredible Journey.
Okay. My other one was Profit and Lace.
Oh, well, that's just crap.
We don't need to demean, belittle, insult whole groups of people. We also, maybe even worse, for me, from my perspective, we don't need to glorify sexual harassment in the workplace by making it seem like the woman was okay with it.
Oh, that's true.
Star Trek is better than that. It should be better than that. We should want to be better than that. Or at least we damn well should want to be. No woman who has ever been harassed or held back in the workplace thinks, oh, that's what I should have done. I should have just enjoyed it and then it would have been great for me. It doesn't happen. Oh, I was very upset by that.
That episode was tone deaf on multiple levels.
Yes. All right, let's talk about the best performances by our regulars in season 6. I didn't even write it down because it's so obvious whose season this is. But what do you think is the answer?
Well, that's such a tough one because Avery Brooks knocked it out of the park. A Nadar visitor. I'm going to go and say it's Kira. Just because I think you saw Kira behaving differently from how the character would in season 1 and earlier seasons. She's able to deal more with the politics of having to put on that happy face when she's on the station because it's under occupation. And only at the end, when things come to a head, does she have to change. So I think in terms of the character and the acting, Kira's performance is probably just going to edge out Brooks, even though he was fantastic this season.
I'm surprised that that's your answer because of In the Pale Moonlight and Far Beyond the Stars. To me, this just felt like Avery Brooks's season.
Yeah.
But has he changed a lot since the beginning of the season and the end? Not really, but no. I do think his performances were great. And Nana Visitor to me, is right behind that. So I can't argue with your thoughts there. At this point, one of our categories here is best overall character development. But gosh, by season 6, how much are we really developing any of these characters anymore? Who do you think was best developed in season 6?
Well, it was Kira, because I think that comes back to the reasons why I thought her performance was the best, of the way Kira has changed and was able to cope with these situations.
I agree.
But when she needs to go back, she can do the 180 and turn back into the freedom fighter.
Yeah, and we saw all of those things in this season, because we saw her turn back briefly when she was just going to kill Ducat when she went back in the past.
Right.
But we also saw her learn from that and evolve. So I agree. Of our main characters, she was the one with the most development this season. Yep.
Well, I think we should bring up which character needs the most work this season.
Isn't it always Bashir?
Yeah, it's Bashir. It's like we step back to season 1. You said this in one of the episodes of, it feels like we took a step backwards when they revealed he was an augment.
Oh, we totally did, yeah.
And I have to agree that the writing for Bashir is kind of stalled.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say there.
I also want to bring up most improved.
Yep.
I think they actually managed to write Quark so he wasn't awful this season.
Except for that Prophet and Lace, where he was horrible. Well, apart from that episode, I agree with you. They actually did some things to make him likable. There was even one episode where he defended one of the Dabo women.
Yeah.
But other than that, I didn't think there were even a lot of changes with the characters. So I don't have anything different from Quark.
He did also put his own neck out on the line in Sacrifice of Angels.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. To save his brother, yeah. Okay, I'll give you Quark, and as long as we can pretend like Prophet and Lace never happened. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's a good strategy, I think.
I even liked him in Who Mourns for Morn, when he was in the box full of money, which turned out to be fake money. That was actually quite funny.
Yeah.
And I think we agreed we liked him in his way, where he was just trying to get Odo to pay attention to his feelings and do something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, he actually gave good advice to Odo. He did call Odo on why haven't you done anything.
Yeah. Well, worst performances, the only thing I put here was I didn't actually think Rosalind Chow was great in Time's Orphan, but I don't want to blame her because it was a terrible episode.
Yeah.
And she didn't have a lot to work with.
Well, neither did Cole Meany.
Exactly. Keiko and Miles didn't seem to care about their kid. They did not believe in this story because it was dumb. I don't want to beat up on them over a bad story.
Yeah, you can't blame actors when they have bad material.
Right. Well, did you have anything else for worst performance?
I kind of feel for Siddiq here because I feel some of the writing is just garbage for him. I feel he gets the short end of the stick.
It's tough to argue that. Okay, then let's go to our last category, which is costumes and hair. Do you have anything for that one?
Well, I feel they haven't relied on the aliens and heavy makeup this season as they have in the past. I wonder if in development they moved more funds into doing the space effects and the battle scenes and the sort of the flashy stuff rather than spending the time on complex costumes and makeup and that kind of thing. Because outside, I would say, of the regulars like Ducat and Damar, who they look fantastic as Cardassians.
Yeah, totally. When we saw him out of makeup, we were like, ugh.
Who's that guy? The only other person really is Graythan Tolar, who was this very strange-looking blue alien in Pale Moonlight. Yeah. And really, that's kind of about it in terms of impressive-looking aliens.
Yeah, because in the first several seasons, maybe 1, 2, and 3, we were still introducing new characters. But now we have these characters we're used to. We know what the Cardassians look like. You know, we know what Odo and the Changelings look like. We know what Weyoun and the Vorta look like. And so there aren't quite as many new ones.
Right, right.
What I would say is that the episode of Far Beyond the Stars, where everybody was out of their makeup, I thought that was great for hair and makeup. I thought everybody looked awesome. Kira looked incredible, and Michael Dorn looked incredible, yeah.
That's a guy who can rock a suit.
To me, that one was the best for hair and makeup, with maybe only the other one that stood out for me. I know Kira wears her awesome purple dress uniform at least once.
Yep.
I think it's in maybe Sons and Daughters, and, you know, I love her in that uniform. But the only other one I might point out is Martog's wife in You're Cordially Invited. Oh. She had some pretty impressive robes in particular. They were all wearing great costumes during the wedding ceremony.
Agreed.
Yep.
Worst hair is pretty easy this season.
Was it when Ducat looked like a 50s housewife?
Mullet
in
Ducat.
A Time to Stand.
Cardassian mullet. What was up with that?
It was bad. Okay. Let me just talk quickly about some of our numbers.
Okay.
When I look at the percentages of thumbs up across the different seasons, if I was going to say which season did we like the most based on the number of thumbs up that we gave, it's season 5, not season 6.
Interesting.
I gave 81% thumbs up in season 5. You gave 88%. And in season 6, I only gave 65% and you gave 77%. So this again is one of those examples where the highs are so high, but you only get 1 thumbs up. Like you only get 1 thumbs up for In the Pale Moonlight. You don't get 5.
Yeah.
Even if it's 5 times better than something from a previous season. But I just thought that was interesting that season 5 is the one that we gave more thumbs up to.
Well, the lows end up lower. Episodes that are filler stand out so much more when you have an expectation.
Yeah.
When you have episodes like The Ship, Valiant, Pale Moonlight, when you have an episode that doesn't work,
Time's Orphan,
it stands out like a sore thumb.
Agreed. The other thing that I found interesting in the data, which if you're a data scientist, maybe you would find this interesting. And so I'm trying not to talk too much about data because, I could do a whole episode
yes.
about the data.
You're a numbers person.
But when I look at the neutrals for season 6, I had the highest percentage of neutrals for me across, and for both of us actually, across all the seasons in 19%. And the reason I find that interesting is that what that tells me is I didn't give a thumbs down to everything. And if we look back at season 1, 32% of the thumbs for me were down. But now we come to this season, and I clearly like the show so much more that I am more willing to go, okay, neutral instead of thumbs down, which is what you did in the beginning. You wouldn't give a thumbs down. You would only give a neutral. So I feel like I've sort of switched. I've come over to the light side or the dark side, whichever side you want to call this. And I clearly like the show a lot more than I did in the beginning. I would argue because it's better than it was in the beginning. But I just think that shows an evolution for me, that now I'm at the point where, okay, I'm more forgiving when something bad happens. But I also think sometimes in the bad episodes, there are good things that I like as well.
Yes.
So I just thought that was interesting, but I won't harp on the data any more than that.
Well, it's good data. You like the data. It shows some very interesting progression as we watch the show.
Yes. All right, let's move on to feedback.
Okay.
We did get some audio feedback from Jeff X Force 11 about season 6.
Thank you, Jeff.
So here it is.
Well, hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff, X-Force 11, leaving my feedback about Season 6 of Deep Space Nine. Well, I can say that I have enjoyed this the most out of the season so far because of the Dominion War and the raised stakes. I also am so glad that I've been on this journey with you all because of what's going on in Season 3 of Picard. I'm much more prepared. But I will say that it is sad for me that we have just got the last season of Deep Space Nine to go, but I'm glad that y'all are going to do Voyager next. But thank you for introducing me to Deep Space Nine in a real way and giving your thoughts and giving us a breakdown of every episode. I'm really enjoying it. And honestly, I know that Worf and Dax was a short-term thing because I'd seen some stuff, but still, it's just hard to know that that's going to come to an end. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Thank you for the feedback, Jeff. Very positive. I'm glad we're keeping Jeff entertained in the show.
Yeah, always happy to hear from Jeff and appreciate the positive feedback. Thank you, Jeff. We are just no longer able to read all of our emails because there are too many, which is great. We have tried to do it. The last couple of wrap-ups, we tried to do it, and it just ends up taking hours, and nobody wants to listen to that for hours, and we don't want to do that for hours. I just want to say thank you for your amazing emails. So many times we'll get a heartfelt message from someone, and we will just think, wow, this is the greatest email we've ever had. And then the next day we'll get another one, and we'll be like, no, this is the greatest email that we've ever had.
I don't know whether it's Star Trek fans, but we get so many emails that are really detailed that go into overanalysis and just talk about the show. And you really see how much people love these shows.
Yeah, agreed. I also really like it when people are connecting to the things that matter to you and me. And it matters to me that you're allowed to love something that I don't like and vice versa. But also we listen to each other's opinions. We've changed each other's minds on different episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And when we get messages about that, what our relationship looks like from the outside, and let me tell you what it looks like from the outside is what it is like from the inside. We have these kinds of conversations all the time. But when we get emails where people see that and they appreciate that, that makes me really care about what we're doing and think, okay, I guess, yes, it's hard sometimes and we want to take a day off, but we don't. we just keep plowing through. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I really appreciate those emails. I see you when you send me those things, when you send me an emotional email. I see it and just don't stop. Don't hesitate if you think, oh, they don't want to hear that. We absolutely do want to hear that. So please keep sending them.
And most importantly, people should continue to send your overanalysis. We have received extremely long emails with people's overanalysis, which I think we've replied to in depth to all of them.
Yes. So let's start talking now about some of the interactions about specific episodes. And this interaction is on Twitter, Facebook, and Gmail. Our Twitter handle is @ReBingeIT, same on Instagram. And our email, of course, is ReBingeIT@gmail.com. And I also often forget to say this, but if you'd like to join our Facebook group, it is facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts with an S at the end. The group has been relatively quiet lately because the other pods in the network have been quiet, but we're hoping that all starts to bounce back here pretty soon. All right, the first bit of feedback I'm going to talk about is about Change of Heart, the episode where Dax and Worf failed to rescue a Cardassian defector.
Yes.
And Michael C., who I like to call my nemesis on Facebook, he told us that he really loves that episode, and he says he's rewatched it millions of times. And in his opinion, this episode makes Worf more than just some basic cartoon or a one-dimensional character. And he says honor isn't the be-all, end-all that Worf thought it would be.
That's a good summary.
Yep.
Regarding Far Beyond the Stars, Davia A. said, as a young black woman watching this episode when it first aired, I found this episode hopeful. It acknowledged horrors of the past while showing us the great potential of the future. Watching it now in the shadow of recent events, I'm sad as I think of all the potential lost. But she also said, DS9 is still my favorite Trek. This episode is still one of the most memorable and generally brings a smile to my face. Thank you for that perspective. We did debate whether this episode was a downer or whether it was uplifting. So I appreciate her perspective there.
Yeah, we did talk about that. On the Klingon wedding episode, You Are Cordially Invited, Michael C. said, this episode is my guilty pleasure. Had I gotten married in 1998 instead of 1988, this guy right here would have worked extremely hard to convince his Japanese bride that a traditional Klingon marriage ceremony was a legal requirement whenever an American citizen married a foreign national.
Oh, man.
And then we had a little back and forth there on Facebook, but when he realized that he and I were on the same page for once, he posted, James, between you and me, Kim sometimes makes good points. I just felt like that was a big win for me on the podcast.
Yeah.
Because he's still holding a grudge that I called the Tribble episode boring, and I stand by my review. Now, regarding statistical probabilities, this is the podcast that we received the most emails and comments about. Some felt it was honoring Asimov's Foundation series, not insulting it, as we sort of implied on the pod. Some also felt it was tragic rather than playing for laughs, which is, again, what we saw. For example, Matt E. wrote, these were all characters who had no say in what they became, characters who were outcast because of not just the eugenics wars, but because the Federation didn't want to figure out how to deal with them. So they remain sequestered in an institute where they only interact with each other. I agree with that. Those were tragic figures. I just didn't think that they executed on the tragic figures as well as they could have.
Yeah.
And it just ended up to us feeling more insulting than it did maybe honoring the tragedy.
Yeah.
But we also, for this episode, we had about the same number of messages agreeing with our take. And, it's clearly a polarizing episode.
It's fascinating that this episode seems to bring up very strong opinions.
Yeah, agreed. It's definitely polarizing.
It's certainly not stood the test of time, but some people find it meaningful. So,
yeah, we respect that. It just didn't work for us.
Right.
I think the last one I'll read from Twitter,
Yeah.
Gravitational Eddie on Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night wrote, "The way I view Kira's time travel is a bit different to what you suggested. The prophets didn't have to take over a stranger for Kira to inhabit or insert her into past events. In my headcanon, Kira was always meant to be there in the first place. It didn't matter that she was from the future because to the prophets, the future, past, and present are all the same. The orb simply took her to where she needed to be." And that's such a great way of looking at it.
That is definitely good headcanon. I like that one.
Yeah, we love headcanon at this podcast.
Agreed. Anyone who wants to share their headcanon, tweet, email, let us know.
All right, I think that's all we have time for about individual episodes. So now maybe we'll just quickly talk about a few of the amazing emails we received.
Yes.
Molly W. is one of my absolute favorite emails, and we got that one just recently because, again, we're recording well in advance of where we're releasing. But she talked about coming to Star Trek later in life than what we did, but the show and the podcast came to her at an important and a difficult time. So I'm glad we've been there for her without even knowing it. And she talked about valuing the Trek community in general, but also appreciating how we can, you and I, James and I, can show affection for, but still be critical of a thing that we love. And that is something that we try to do because we do love Star Trek, but you have to look at things critically. Otherwise, you're just letting somebody tell you how to think and how to act, and we're just not into that. I also really liked how she said that we've set her podcast bar high because I feel like my podcast bar is very high and the audio quality has got to be good or I just turn it off. So I appreciated that. Anyway, thank you, Molly, for a lovely email, which we both really loved.
Yeah, thank you. That was much appreciated. Also, I want to bring up Michael N. sent us a great extended overanalysis, which I've had to cut down, but was an awesome read. And he says, much like Atiba, while you touched on the idea that Garak had never intended to use his contacts, I think his manipulation goes well beyond that. First, I think the episode gives pretty strong evidence Garak never utilized the resources he had on Cardassia. Further, I don't think Garak would hinge a plan on something he wouldn't be able to get a hold of. The optolithic data rod. Garak already had one stashed away. Speaking of biomimetic gel, a theory I've seen online is that Garak used the gel to make the explosives. And as for Tolar, I think he was just a loose end from an old mission that Garak figured he could finally dispose of. Garak probably didn't like having Tolar hanging around out there all those years. And you asked, where was Section 31? Who do you think convinced those admirals to sign off on Cisco's plan?
That's my favorite part of that email. It's such a great point.
Thank you, Michael N. That was great.
Yes.
That's an edited highlight of his email. Also, Jeff L., who gave us some great feedback. Thank you, Jeff. And he did also say, the only criticism I will offer is that you are both seriously wrong about the Cisco Snodgrass episodes. Jeff actually had the seriously in capitals, so I think our opinions really diverged there.
And that was last season, but I think he sent this when last season was still airing, but we had moved on to the next season, which is why we would have missed it. But I would like to know his opinion on that. He has not replied with how we were wrong. So I can only assume he decided we were right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the last one that we're going to read is Andrew J. And Andrew says, hey, Kim and James, I've been absolutely loving the Rebinge DS9 podcast. DS9 is my favorite series ever since I was young. Your podcast deep dives and personal outlooks have brought me a new appreciation for DS9 and Star Trek as a whole. You guys reveal things I never saw before. So many times I'll be listening and you guys will say something and I'll be like, wow, I never saw that before. I listen at work. It's been great. Keep up the awesome work. Sincerely, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Andrew.
Well, we have a lot more, but we
have time constraints.
Reached the end of this podcast. There's only so long that we can record.
Thank you to everyone who sent in their ideas. This is only a subset of the emails we got. We appreciate everything we get, and Kim replies to everything.
I try to. Okay, that wraps up our Season 6 wrap-up.
Yes, that's the wrap-up of the wrap-up.
And now into Season 7.
It gets better from here, Kim.
Okay. How many times do I have to hear that?
I believe that is what Cal E sent to us as well. Tell Kim it gets better from here.
Always. Oi, oi, oi. Well, Season 7 is the end of Deep Space Nine, and we do have some ideas when we get to the end of that season. You know, we're going to watch the documentary, obviously, but we've also been talking about we'll probably go back and watch the first episode again and do another podcast about that. But then our plan currently is to move on to Voyager.
Yes.
And that idea has really been strengthened by Prodigy and how much we've enjoyed Prodigy. And we'll say again, if you're not watching Prodigy, you're missing out.
On great track.
That's our plan. So right now, as we go into season 7, we are going to take 2 full weeks off of recording and releasing. Actually, we'll probably record in there, but we won't release for a couple of weeks.
Yes.
So please join us then. And in the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com or tweet at us at ReBingeIT. We're also on Instagram and YouTube at ReBingeIT. And just a reminder, our Facebook group is facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the Season 6 wrap-up of Rebinge Deep Space Nine.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.